Two of Jamaica's most important airports were ripped apart by Hurricane Melissa, leaving the island's skies in chaos and the world in disbelief. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on the devastation left behind at Sangster International in Montego Bay and Norman Manley in Kingston, two airports that stand as lifelines for the nation's economy, tourism, and trade. You'll discover how these facilities were damaged, the recovery plans now in motion, and a shocking twist that no one, not even the experts, saw coming. By the end, you'll understand how this single storm could redefine disaster resilience and air transport across the Caribbean. So, let's dive right into one of the most severe infrastructure crises the Caribbean has seen in recent history and uncover what this truly means for Jamaica's aviation future. To really grasp the scale of what happened, we have to rewind to the days leading up to Melissa's landfall. Hurricane Melissa roared toward Jamaica as a monstrous Category 5 system, one of the strongest hurricanes ever to strike the island. With sustained winds reaching up to 185 miles per hour, or 298 kilometers per hour, it unleashed catastrophic damage across the nation. Western parishes like Street Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Street James, Trelawney, and Hanover bore the brunt of its fury. Floodwaters swallowed entire communities, storm surges pounded coastal defenses, and roofs were torn off like paper. The timing couldn't have been worse. Jamaica was still nursing wounds from Hurricane Beryl in 2024, which had already tested the country's disaster preparedness and strained its resources. Infrastructure across the island was still recovering when Melissa arrived to finish what Beryl had started. Amid this chaos stood two vital gateways: Sangster International Airport, MBJ, in Montego Bay, and Norman Manley International Airport, CAN, in Kingston. These weren't just travel hubs, they were the country's arteries, connecting Jamaica to global tourism, trade, and emergency relief. But when Melissa hit, everything changed. In the days before landfall, Jamaican authorities took no chances. All airports were shut down by October 25, a precautionary move to protect passengers, crews, and equipment. It was the calm before the chaos. When Melissa made landfall, the island's western region, particularly Montego Bay, was ground zero. Sangster International, Jamaica's busiest airport, took a direct hit. Aerial footage revealed scenes of total destruction. Huge sections of the passenger terminal's roof were torn off, interior ceilings collapsed, and once bustling departure lounges were now flooded and filled with debris. Walls cracked, glass shattered, and pools of water formed inside what used to be secure, climate-controlled zones. ReliefWeb described the scene as the worst damage suffered among all of Jamaica's international airports. Flooding extended deep into the concourses, and large parts of the structure were deemed unsafe. Electrical systems were compromised, and communication lines went down. Meanwhile, over in Kingston, Norman Manley International Airport, KIN/NMIA, managed to avoid the storm's full wrath. Damage there was far less severe, mostly minor, isolated structural issues that didn't threaten the airport's core integrity. Crucially, the Palisado Strip, the narrow roadway connecting Kingston to the airport, held firm against the storm surge, a miracle given how easily it could have been swallowed by the sea. By the time skies cleared, emergency teams began assessing both facilities. The immediate question arose: which airport would bounce back first? Many assumed Kingston would lead the recovery, but as we'll soon uncover, the real story was far more complex. Let's start with Sangster International Airport, MBJ, in Montego Bay. According to official situation reports released by October 31, the airport remained closed to regular commercial traffic. However, relief flights had already begun landing by October 30, bringing emergency aid, food, and medical supplies. Cleanup crews worked tirelessly around the clock, dewatering flooded areas, reinforcing damaged structural supports, and beginning the massive task of roof replacement. Aviation Week reported that although Sangster aimed to reopen for limited commercial operations by the end of October, 7 of its gates would remain offline due to water damage and compromised roofing. Jamaica's Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport, Daryl Vaz, confirmed that several gates were severely damaged and would need to be removed from service altogether. Still, he assured the public that the remaining gates were enough to handle passenger traffic outside of the heavy tourism season. The government and airport management outlined a phased reopening plan aiming for full commercial operations by November 1, 2025. Meanwhile, recovery teams from local construction firms and international partners focused on restoring electrical systems, rebuilding ceilings, and reinforcing the airport's drainage network to prevent future flooding. Now over to Kingston. At Norman Manley International, NIA, reports from the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, indicated that damage assessments were still underway, but the airport was operational for all intents and purposes. By October 30, relief aircraft had already made 9 successful landings, delivering critical supplies for affected communities. Repairs at NMIA were relatively minimal, primarily safety inspections, structural checks, and electrical tests. The focus here was on ensuring stability rather than reconstruction. But with Sangster still recovering, Kingston quickly became the nation's new air hub. Flights originally destined for Montego Bay were diverted to NMIA, putting enormous pressure on Kingston's logistics systems. Customs, ground handling, and passenger processing suddenly had to manage double their usual volume. Airlines scrambled to reroute schedules, while relief operations fought to keep pace with surging demand. Western Jamaica's tourism-dependent economy, however, struggled without direct access through Montego Bay. As the cleanup continued, one pressing question loomed large: which airport would make a full comeback first, and what obstacles were waiting just beyond the horizon? The official recovery timeline broke down into 4 key phases. The first phase, relief and emergency access, began almost immediately. Both Sangster and Norman Manley reopened for emergency aid flights by October 29 to 30. Next came the limited commercial reopening phase, with Sangster cautiously welcoming reduced commercial flights by October 31, operating only from undamaged gates. The third phase would be full commercial operations, projected to resume gradually throughout November 2025, depending on repair progress and inspection outcomes. Finally, the long road to structural restoration, a deep rebuild involving new roofing, upgraded drainage, and flood-resistant infrastructure, was expected to stretch well into late 2025 and beyond 2026. According to updates from the Half Moon Resort and the Airports Authority of Jamaica, Sangster's phased reopening would align with the start of the next tourism season. Yet full structural restoration, including complete roofing and interior rebuilds, could take months, if not a full year more. Authorities have hinted that both airports will undergo major resilience upgrades, such as storm-resistant roofing materials, improved flood barriers, and enhanced emergency power systems. Melissa exposed the vulnerability of Jamaica's coastal infrastructure, and this recovery is as much about modernization as it is about repair. But recovery doesn't come easy. Behind the official optimism lies a web of challenges. The first is weather instability. With hurricane seasons growing more intense, there's always the risk of new storms interrupting ongoing repairs. Next, supply chain disruptions are slowing progress. The Caribbean region faces shortages of construction materials and skilled technicians, making it difficult to import specialized roofing panels and electrical equipment. Then there's funding pressure. Jamaica's government and the Airports Authority must balance recovery costs against a strained national budget, all while ensuring the tourism economy doesn't collapse in the meantime. And finally, operational bottlenecks persist. With most Western flights rerouted to Kingston, passenger congestion and cargo delays have become common. Travelers face longer wait times, and logistics companies are reporting record demand at NIA. Even when the structures are repaired, restoring traveler confidence, especially among tourists who rely on Sangster for easy access to resorts, may take far longer. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn. The biggest impact of Hurricane Melissa wasn't just the physical destruction. It was the strategic shift it triggered in Jamaica's aviation map. For decades, Sangster International dominated Jamaica's air travel, serving as the country's tourism gateway. But with Melissa knocking it out of full operation for months, Kingston's Norman Manley Airport stepped in and might never step back. The shift in flight patterns, emergency logistics, and international traffic could permanently tilt Jamaica's aviation balance eastward. Airlines, seeing how fragile the Western infrastructure can be, may choose to base more operations in Kingston, where the risk of storm surge and direct hurricane impact is slightly lower. That means new jobs, new investments, and new attention could flow toward Kingston, while Montego Bay's dominance slowly erodes. So, in an unexpected twist, Melissa didn't just tear off roofs. It might have redrawn Jamaica's aviation geography, changing the country's economic flow for years to come. In the end, Hurricane Melissa left a deep scar on Jamaica's skies. Sangster International Airport suffered catastrophic roof and flood damage, while Norman Manley International escaped with only light bruises. Relief flights resumed within days, and limited commercial operations returned by October 31. But full restoration at Sangster will continue well into 2026, with ongoing structural rebuilds and resilience upgrades. Still, the true legacy of Melissa may not be measured in repair costs or reopening dates, but in the way it permanently shifted Jamaica's air traffic, testing the island's adaptability in the face of disaster. If this deep dive gave you a new perspective on Jamaica's fight to rebuild, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more global infrastructure breakdowns and crisis stories. I want to hear from you in the comments. Which airport do you think will define Jamaica's future? The resilient Sangster International or the rising Norman Manley International? Drop your thoughts below, and I'll personally reply to the most insightful ones. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more powerful stories of how nations rebuild, one runway